We are here to talk about mental health because yesterday was World Mental Health Day, and that's an annual event organised by the World Federation for Mental Health. And Amy, who works for Q&R, give us a wave. Amy is going to drop in some links to the chat function if you're not already in touch with these organisations, just to help you and your resources back out into your organisations. And also, thanks so much for coming along today, all our audience, because every one of you that has attended, we're going to be donating £10 on your behalf to mind.org.uk, doing our little bit from Q&R, so thank you. And then after this half an hour, we'll send out the link if you want to share it back out to your teams for all the rich advice that I hope we're going to be gleaning today, or out to your clients and contacts. So please make this half an hour work hard for you and your contacts. So without further ado, I'm going to ask each of our three panelists. We have Rob Stephenson, who's smashing the stigma around mental health and is the founder of FormScore. We have Michelle Morgan, who is a founder, I think, of no less 5 purpose-led businesses, and just published a book, which she'll tell us about. And we also have Charlotte Wiseman, who is expert in resilience training. So 3 really linked but different approaches to mental health. So I'm going to deep dive in. And can you just introduce yourself if I've missed anything? Rob first, and then I'm going to ask you a question.
Sure, thank you, Annabel, and good to see everyone this afternoon. So Rob Stephenson, I'm a mental health campaigner, public speaker, do a bunch of stuff in the space on a mission of trying to help inspire the creation of mentally healthy workplaces. And those are workplaces where people can feel they can put their hand up and say, I'm struggling with mental ill health, and receive help. But they're also workplaces where people can feel equipped, empowered, and I guess have the awareness to prioritize well-being. So there's a couple of things I do in the space: the InsideOut Leaderboard, which is a not-for-profit showcasing business leaders, workplace leaders who are open about their challenges, and FormScore, which is a technology solution helping answer that question, how are you today?
Great stuff. And so first question for you, Rob, what does mental fitness mean to you? Because there's mental health, there's mental illness. What does mental fitness mean?
So, I think I'm not a massive fan of the word mental fitness. I prefer mental wellness, but, I understand why we use that, because actually, if we say the words mental health, we often immediately think of suffering, of depression, of anxiety, of PTSD, of people experiencing mental ill health. So mental health has a brand problem, really. Because we all have mental health, we all have mental well-being. And so for me, mental fitness is really the process, like our physical fitness, of investing in our own mental well-being to be as thriving as we can for most of the time. Now, aside from Amy, who fuels her 10 out of 10 with wine, I've just learned before we went on the call, nobody can thrive all of the time. We all go up and down with our mental fitness, or our FormScore, to use my language. And so for me, prioritizing mental fitness is building up the awareness as what is driving it, because it's highly personal at an individual level, and then investing in proactively managing it. And that could be prioritizing sleep, or could be getting outside to exercise, or it could be working on connections. But for me, mental fitness is that process of trying to be as thriving as we can for as often as we can.
Okay, great stuff. Whilst you mentioned the FormScore, let's just explain that. Can you briefly do that, and then perhaps ask all our participants to drop their score, if they're willing to, in the chat function on the right? So
yeah, of course. So I experienced bipolar, and a therapist gave me this tool many years ago to just track my own mental well-being with a score out of 10, to track my mood. So today you can see I'm a 7 out of 10, good form. And there's a bunch of questions that I ask myself each day, which is around: how well have you slept? How well have I exercised? How connected do I feel? How well am I balancing stress with moments of recovery? What's the sense of purpose like? Financial wellness, all of the things that would contribute to mental fitness. And we've built this into both an app and a workplace solution that aggregates these scores up to give a real-time metric of team well-being and organizational well-being. So today, all of that goes into the mix, and I'm a 7 out of 10. I kind of slept well. Need to work on my connections a little bit. I haven't been able to exercise as much as I would have liked to because of long COVID, which is also draining my energy a little bit. So pretty good form, all of that considered, feeling pretty purposeful, delighted to be here today. So that comes to a 7 out of 10. And it's, again, if you're happy to share, just drop in the chat. What's your score out of 10 where your wellness is concerned? So great, Helen, you're a 9. Fantastic. It's good to see that. And thank you for sharing. And the idea is it's just a very non-threatening way of communicating how we're feeling.
Fantastic, thank you. And thanks also to Mark, who's just joined the call. Welcome to you too, didn't say hello earlier. Charlotte, can I turn to you now? Just a very brief intro. We're rattling through, we've got a very short amount of time, but what would the difference between mental health and fitness be in your world? Can you describe that distinction?
Yeah, great to be here. And I think, as Rob said, I think a lot of the challenge with the term mental health is that we assume it means mental ill health, but of course it is health, you know, the same way as if you were physically healthy, you'd think of that. For me, the difference between our base level health and our fitness is our ability to adapt to whatever life throws at us. So there's one thing to kind of be healthy, but if we are about to become a parent or about to go through something, we might find that unsettles us. And if we're fit, if we're mentally fit, we're able to deal with those challenges. So I think they're very much related, because your mental health is going to enable you to be more mentally fit, but the mental fitness aspect is maybe having some tools which you can use in those moments to overcome whatever situations arise, whether that's knowing your own thinking patterns and knowing how to manage those. But it's not just being able to survive them. It's exactly as Rob said, being able to love them and enjoy them and thrive on them and actually learn from those experiences. So, you know, fitness, you have to put yourself under a bit of pressure. You have to get the heart rate up if you want to get fitter. Actually, same goes for our mental health. Stress is a really positive thing for us if we embrace it and approach it in a way that we're learning from it.
Fantastic. I'm interested in the tips and practical steps. We'll come back to you on those. Michelle, can I bring you in? Of course, times are changing. We've been through the pandemic. We've seen enormous impact on mental health. But do you still sense there's a challenge for people to talk about it? Is it still awkward? And if so, why is that?
Yeah, I think without a doubt, it is still awkward. What I've been learning about over the last, during this year, as I wrote my book, which is called Own Your Awkward, is that actually feeling awkward about talking about our mental health is quite a natural response. We're all in some way going to feel awkward when either I'm going to tell you about my mental health and how in the comments it was an 8 this morning, feels like a 7 right now, and I hope that it's going to come up because I've got a sense that I'm going to get some really good energy. And I have emotional dysregulation, which I now take medication for. And I got that diagnosis and I'm able to talk about it because I talked about it, because I stepped into that space of embracing the awkwardness. But I know now that it is a natural survival instinct. It is our fight, flight, freeze response kicking in. And that happens for all of us, whether we're conscious or unconscious of it. But to answer the question more specifically, I think over the last decade, actually, over quite a big period of time, we have seen immense change in terms of awareness and feeling that we can talk about it, and also that we should be talking about it and we should have greater awareness and understanding. So much has been achieved over a decade. However, I believe that we're still only at the kind of the tip of the iceberg with it. And we all get together in this setting, but that's because we're already here, a lot of us. So we'll see each other. Rob and I will see each other, and we're playing our part in bringing more people into the conversation, and then we'll end up in other spaces and see some of those people. And that is the brilliant message, is that once people get it, once everyone else on this call is prepared to own their awkward, it helps others own theirs, and so it continues. But I do think that we actually have a long way to go, and that is a leadership issue. But leadership is within us all, so we can all play our part.
I love the own your awkward. That's a hashtag and a t-shirt slogan in itself.
Sorry for plugging the book so early on into,
No,
into the whole thing. I'm sorry, I'm feeling awkward about that.
That's no problem at all. Please drop the link into the chat function for everyone to see. Rob, can I come back to you? Michelle mentioned leadership, and of course this is really interesting in a business context. What role do you think leaders can and perhaps should, if I'm allowed to use the should word, play in creating a mental health safe place on the mental health front?
Well, I think leaders have a crucial role, and this is the core of what we do with the InsideOut Leaderboard. And when I first started looking for a way to become a campaigner and contribute, I kept hearing the same message, in that we do not have enough workplace leaders who are sharing their stories of mental ill health to act as role models. And actually, if we look in the workplace, our leaders are often the people we look up to. They are our role models. And so if you have a workplace leader, a CEO, a CFO, a partner, a line manager who's talking about mental ill health, talking about their challenges, that gives people permission to then talk about theirs. It creates that culture of safety to do so. So it's crucially important. And I think we need leaders to get behind the agenda, to set the tone, to create that safe space. We hear a lot of talk about psychological safety right now. Psychological safety is around, feeling safe in speaking out about things that are concerning us or making mistakes, and not feel that we'll be judged or held back because of it. So if you've got a CEO or a board member talking about their mental health challenges, and you're experiencing depression or maybe just getting diagnosed, you might feel a bit more comfortable going to your line manager to say, hey, I've got this going on, I might need a bit of help or need a few adjustments to the role. So crucially important. But I think, the other bit around leadership is, I think the nature of what makes an effective leader is changing as we're traveling through this pandemic to one of more authentic, vulnerable, empathetic style of leadership. That's what people need right now to recover from these challenges. So I think it's all pretty linked together, really. But I know that when leaders do speak out and share their stories, that transforms the culture from the top down, and allows that groundswell of interest to help make positive change.
Fantastic. So Charlotte, picking up on Rob's points there around leadership, how do you see that playing out in the workplace from your work on resilience and supporting the mental health agenda?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's exactly what Rob's saying about the importance of leaders speaking up about what they're going through. I'm actually writing an article at the moment about this, because I do a lot of focus groups in companies where I'm going in and just trying to kind of get underneath the surveys and talk to people and say, what do you want to see happening? What does mental health mean for you in this workplace? How can we create that? And a lot of the time, what people want more than anything is the leaders not to change anything, but just to say, we're going through it too, and to be honest, because that sense of, oh, actually, this is okay, is so powerful. So I'll be writing an article on that later this month. But what's just important, exactly as Rob said, is it's something we can all start doing when someone asks us, how are we? How are you? Just stop saying fine. What does that mean? So it's so important, because we know from the research side of things that somewhere between 96 and 98% of leaders burn out at some point in their career. And when we get the kind of the stuff written about burnout, people usually focus on the general workplace, which is maybe the 80 to 90%, rather than leaders are burning out. And if you've got a leader who's stressed, that is not going to have a positive impact on the rest of the team. That's going to ripple so quickly. And so it's about a lot of my work is around sustainable leadership, which is how do we help leaders to manage themselves so that they can be at their best, and therefore they can support their teams without getting to that point. And then with that, how do they inspire and support their teams so their teams don't burn out? Because as soon as you get a leader who's not looking after themselves, not being honest about how they're doing, trying to, plaster over the cracks, then it ripples. And it really is, it starts with leaders being honest with themselves, and exactly as Michelle was saying, owning their awkward, you know, their internal stigma around I'm supposed to be perfect, I'm always supposed to be strong, deal with that. And then that actually enables them to be better leaders because of that psychological safety and because of the way then that they are in a position to truly be at their best for their teams.
It's really interesting, isn't it? Because it's a fine balance between admitting that you are feeling overwhelmed, but also demonstrating leadership. It's a fine line to tread, and some people, I guess, get it, and some people might fall off completely.
Yeah, you don't want people to be worried that their job's going to go because you're about to crumble or any of the rest of it. So it's definitely a fine balance, and there's some great books on that. If anyone, you know, is interested, they're always welcome to email me, and I can give you sort of books about that or extra bits to learn.
Fantastic. Michelle, as a self-confessed burnout-y, I don't know how one would express it, but how would you say that leaders could look at themselves and work out, are they getting close on that line of burnout, and what could they be doing to address it?
So I'm going to just tell you something that really struck me. Again, apologies when I was writing the book, because I had quite a lot of people contribute to the book, because for me, sharing stories is a really important, and in some ways it's the hardest thing, but in some ways it's the easiest thing that we can do when we share our stories. You know, I've heard Rob's story. It helps me connect with someone, feel less alone. So when we share our stories, that is really powerful. And I wanted to share other people's stories as well as my own in the book. And I got lots of different experiences through, and many of those people were leaders in their businesses or industry leaders. And what really struck me, and I hadn't thought about it very much, was when I was asking people about kind of the awkward conversations they had, a number of people said, actually, the most awkward conversation I had was the one that I had to have with myself, which just felt just such a big insight. And so in order to have that conversation with yourself, to answer your question, Annabel, you've got to be creating space to say, how am I at the moment? How am I coping with the ups and downs of life? How am I looking after myself? What is the self-care? And dare I say it, what is the self-love in my life? Really awkward things, but this is the essence. If we can't care for ourselves, if we can't understand our own stress, our own mental health, if we can't understand when we're feeling like we've got poor health, whether that be physical or mental, then it's really hard to show leadership authentically, genuinely. And that's then to bring it full circle to what Rob and Charlotte were saying. When leaders speak out, share their stories, it does create permissions and trusted spaces. I'm also on the speaker circuit, and a year or so ago, a massive corporate company invited the chief marketing officer invited me in. He invited a number of people in. He gave a whole day to his team to talk about mental health and well-being, and we all had our kind of hour slots. And as he introduced me, he was explaining how he and I had met and that moment of connecting with stories. And he shared with his team, it took him no longer than 3 minutes as he introed me for the main speaking event, but he shared his story. And when I was talking to people afterwards, people saying very nice things to me. That was great. But what I heard time and time again was when Bob, let's call him Bob, when Bob shared his story, wow, couldn't believe it. I just couldn't believe it. Bob, wow. It doesn't have to be a great big long story. You don't have to write a book. You don't have to dedicate your life to it, but you do have to be tapped into yourself in order to then find the courage to share your story.
Yes, courage, interesting word, isn't it? Rob, I'd love to come back to you on that in terms of the practical steps. What would you be advising leaders? What baby steps can they be taking to improve creating those safe spaces for understanding mental health in the workplace?
Well, I think there's one very easy thing we can do as leaders, and that of workplaces, and that is to state that the mental well-being of our employees is a priority of the business. And that's, not every leader is going to be ready to share their personal story. We're working on helping leaders do that, and it has to be the right time. But I think if we can set the prioritization of well-being as a strategic priority of an organization, like John Flint did when he was CEO of HSBC with the healthiest human system, and other CEOs are doing a similar thing, then that sets the tone that actually it is okay to prioritize your well-being. So I think that's the first thing, is set it as a priority. Apologies for any background noise. I think we've got my little lad home from school who doesn't want to do his homework by the sounds of things. C'est la vie. I think the other thing is, where appropriate, is to share stories and be vulnerable. And as both Charlotte and Michelle were saying, is that that vulnerability and saying that it is tough and what they go through, because even a little bit of vulnerability goes a long way in a business. And I think the other thing we can do then is look to the base of employees for other willing people to share their stories. So there's plenty of people that want to do this if the environment is safe to do so. And actually sometimes stories from our peers at all levels of organization has a really positive impact. So I think those three things are things that we can do, but making well-being a priority, that is number one for me.
Okay. And Charlotte, would you echo that? Any other innovative things you've seen in your experience? What works well? What's best practice?
Yeah, I think exactly as Rob's saying, we have to be conscious that not everybody's willing to share everything, and it's not necessary. We can actually start really small with, what was the biggest success of your week? What was the biggest challenge of your week? What are you most looking forward to? And just get leaders to talk about little challenges, get teams to talk about that, on a really basic level, just to kind of warm us up to this. And remember that it is the positive side of being at our best. So celebrating our successes and thanking people for kindness, that's part of mental health too. So, those sorts of things are really, really important, that we don't have to dive in at the deep end. A lot of the companies have already wellness action plans built into their sort of workplace systems, but they're really important if people don't have them, which is just making sure that managers have a way of working through conversations with their team to talk about what helps you stay at your best at work, what might be the things that trigger you to feel a little bit less than at your best. What can I do in those moments? What can you do in those moments? That's really a very simple thing that is easy to implement and pretty much costs nothing to an organization. And as Rob said, getting people to talk about it amongst themselves. So making sure that there's setups to do that. And training is one part of the puzzle, but it's only one part of the puzzle. It's the daily actions. It's the weekly newsletter that mentions mental health or showcases one person's story. That's the stuff which leads to long-term change. And actually, I do a lot of work with Innocent Smoothies, Innocent Drinks Company, and they're going to be posting something later today. And that shares a lot of what they're doing, and they're a really good example of the day-to-day actions that people can take.
I think, yes, keeping that consistency, and it's not a one-hit wonder that we're going to do well-being this month. It's got to be ongoing and organic and getting grassroots level buy-in.
Yeah, there is research that if companies go in and they do one webinar and then they let it flow, that actually has a negative impact on team engagement and morale. So it's worse than if you didn't do anything. So if you're going to do one and think you fixed it for Mental Health Day, World Mental Health Day, let's do a webinar, actually save yourself and put the time and the effort into a monthly newsletter or something else.
Yeah, good advice. We've got three fantastic panelists here, and I'm conscious that there are people nodding and perhaps shaking their heads in some cases. If you've got any questions, this is the moment. We have a few minutes left. If anyone's got any questions, Michelle, Rob or Charlotte, please put them in the chat or just raise your hand. Helen, please come off mute and ask your question.
I'm curious if anybody has, through writing the book and through any research that people have been doing, if anything has been done outside of the UK, perhaps to Asia.
And anybody able to take that?
Yeah, so there's a lot of work being done in Asia. I mean, Asia is a more stigmatized region, generalizing. Mental ill health doesn't discriminate, but stigma certainly does. So the City Mental Health Alliance, which is a network, has got a chapter out in Asia, and there are a number of campaigners that are making positive change. There's a chap called Brian Henderson, who's one of a law firm ops director, who's doing good work. There's someone called Enoch Lee in China. So there are pockets of it, but there's the cultural stigma that we need to overcome in Asia as well. On the InsideOut leaderboard, we had 107 role models this year, and I think we had about 3 of them in Asia. So it's early days, but there is the willingness to make change there. So worth checking out the City Mental Health Alliance. They're doing some good stuff out there.
Lovely. And it might well be worth Helen linking up with Rob after this. Sounds like there's a more conversation to be had there.
For sure.
Esri, you put your hand up. Thank you.
Yes, I did. Thank you. We started out talking a bit about the nuances of words that we use to describe these issues. And I'm curious to know what people think about the phrase, it's okay not to be okay. Because although I understand why people say that, I also find it very uncomfortable, because surely the message should be, actually, it's not okay to not be okay, but it is okay to speak out and to ask for help and so on. But at the same time, I'm aware that there are times when each of us has to inhabit our not being okay. So I don't know, I just wondered if people had a view on that and if there's a better alternative.
Michelle, I'm going to come to you. Yes.
Yeah, I can certainly just add a thought. I totally agree with you, Esri. I think it's become a bit of a complicated one, that one. What I say is, because I think it has been a useful phrase, and sometimes phrases just kind of work for a moment in time. But I say, look, it's okay to not be okay, but it's not okay to constantly not be okay. And if you Google something called the mental health continuum, I think it will probably come up quite quickly. It's a brilliant way to show that we, as we've said, we all have mental health and it's not fixed. And when I say to you, look at the bottom right-hand quadrant on that continuum, if it represents the ups and downs of life, the problem arises when you get stuck in that bottom right-hand quadrant. And that's when it's not okay. And that's when you've got to be talking about it so you can keep moving around that quadrant.
Excellent. Thanks, Michelle. We'll try and find the Google link for that as we speak.
I would change it to it's okay to talk about not being okay, because that's the sentiment we're trying to get across, that if we're struggling, it's okay to talk and seek help.
Great stuff. Any other hands up, questions, burning issues, either affecting your organisation or yourself? This is the moment, or forever hold your peace. I can't see anybody on the bingo window of the Zoom call. Tom, can I put you on the spot as a psychotherapist? What would you say from what you've heard today? Anything that stands out for you?
No, really interesting. Thank you, everybody, for your thoughts. I think it's such an interesting topic. I'm really interested in this issue of nomenclature as well. How do we refer to what we're talking about? And my personal preoccupation, I think, is that it's very difficult to escape from values such as what is normal and what is abnormal. And I think maybe Esri, your point was speaking to that. When we talk about mental health, I think we don't talk nearly enough about how complicated it is to have a mind, and we default to the idea that being normal is that we just have a normal kind of functioning, and that when we're suffering complex mental health or a difficult mental health day, it's because we're sort of straying from that normal. And I would love to hear conversations in organizations about the kind of the deeper mechanics of what drives behavior in organizations, what drives stress, what drives people to feel uncomfortable, and to talk about the complexities of owning a mind and being part of a broader machine, a network of minds. So I think the work that you're all doing is absolutely invaluable. Raising awareness, getting people to talk about things that are difficult, and I couldn't agree more. I think Charlotte, you made a point earlier about the hardest conversation to have is the one with yourself.
Michelle, I think, said that. Yeah.
I beg your pardon. Sorry. And I see my client is arriving, so I've got to go. But thank you very much. Sorry, that was a little bit of a brief, rushed answer, but well done. Great conversation. Thank you. Bye-bye. Bye.
It's for me to now thank Rob, Charlotte and Michelle. Thank you so much. And I see Rob's FormScore has gone up from 8, so I take that as a positive, that it's been a useful use of his time. Please do link in with one another. We can share the list of attendees. If you then want to reach out and get in contact, we can effect that and help that for you. But keep the conversation going. Thank you so much. And we will be donating £10 per attendee as suggested in our invitation to you. So thank you for raising funds for Mind today, and have a good rest of evening. Thank you.